I'm Peter Thompson. I'm the Managing Director of Pro Arte Limited. I'm here at Jackson's studio and I'm here to talk about artist brushes. Yeah, my father founded it. He had a background in art. He was a good artist and always enjoyed art and painting. And he was lucky enough to get a job with Winsor & Newton. And that's really how it all began. His aspiration was to be their sales manager. He was always led to believe that that could have been an opportunity that was going to be open to him. The promotion to be sales manager never really arrived, and that was a great source of frustration to him. So in his early middle age, he decided that he was going to make the break and form his own company, having basically got the experience of selling art materials. He had this knowledge, this wealth of knowledge, and he understood art and he understood brushes in particular. Much of the time, people get it completely wrong. It's spelt Pro Arte, and it comes from the Latin. Many people pronounce it Pro Art, especially in Yorkshire. They say Pro Art. The idea came through my mother. She was very good at languages, and she did actually study Latin. So when my parents were thinking of a name for the company, my father would say, I want something for art. I want something that's meaningful. And it was my mother that came up with the name Pro Arte, Latin for art. Well, my father's vision for artist brushes was born from the fact that he'd worked with Windsors for a long time, and he felt that they didn't sell brushes properly. Many of the brushes were kept behind counters, but he realised as a salesman, if you want a product to sell, you've got to market it properly and display brushes properly. The beauty of brushes, when you get involved in marketing, they're lightweight and compact and very easy to post out to customers as well. But as I say, being an artist, he had this love of brushes because it's a sort of a go-between between the paint and the canvas. It's a tactile product, and he understood it because he was an accomplished artist. So when my father left Windsor's, when he decided to go alone and sell artist brushes, he converted a big loft space in a bungalow that we lived in Leeds. So that was part of the humble beginnings. Synthetics hadn't been developed. They weren't even available on the market. Good ranges were few and far between. You'd either use a Sable brush or a squirrel brush for watercolour, or you'd use a bristle brush for oil. In those very early days, you didn't manufacture, or he didn't manufacture, because he didn't have the manufacturing knowledge or know-how. But he utilised the services of two good UK companies, one that produced some of his cheaper student and craft brushes, and then there was another company that he operated with under the name of Percy P. Baker, and they operated under the name of Recab, which is Baker, the opposite way around. And they were involved in the manufacture of the high-end Squirrel and Kolinsky Sable brushes, and that's really where he made his name. Really, that's where I came into the business from a manufacturing perspective. It was perfect timing because that was when synthetics were hitting the marketplace for the first time. And it gave me the opportunity of developing something brand new. Now, my first part of the business was to work alongside the companies that we'd already worked with. The big break came when the company that I've just spoken about, Percy P. Baker, unfortunately they went bankrupt. They had an operation in the UK that basically fell apart. That was an opportunity for us to get directly involved by employing one or two of their factory workers as our home workers. The first brush that we properly developed was a range that we call Prolene, which is a fully synthetic version of Sable, I suppose. As I say, the first brush that we really produced properly were Sable and Squirrel brushes, or all natural hair brushes. But in order to progress onto synthetics, you've got to have a strong understanding of how a high-end brush is made. So having got the knowledge and the know-how to manufacture traditional brushes, it lent itself that we could move forward into the new world of synthetics. Over the years, we've had a few versions of Proline. It's the same brush, but it's just been improved quite a number of times. So we're probably on our Mark IV version of Proline at the moment. There's been various advances with synthetic hair over the years. When synthetics first hit the marketplace, many brush makers would make use of different diameters for different size brushes. And we soon realised that rather than use a certain diameter for a certain size, it made more sense to blend different diameters together, and that would give more of a sort of natural feel or a natural selection as you get with a natural hairbrush. And we realised that that worked, but it didn't just work right the way through the range. After sort of painstaking development, we realised that you needed different blends right the way through the size range. So a range like Proline, for example, will carry 5 or 6 different blends depending on the size within the range. I suppose as much as anything, it is a generation thing. My father started it, as we've discussed. I came into the business, I came into it at the right time, but I had a love for it because I'd watched my father start the business, so I very much grew up with it, as I suppose Johnny has. So again, it's a generation thing.
Hi, I'm Johnny Thompson. As my father mentioned, I've joined Pro Arte and I look after the marketing side of things, whether that be artist collaborations, social media or blogs. So I've grown up around brushes, having a family that's producing brushes. I remember at school during the holidays, I used to come in and actually help on the manufacturing team. And then following school, I didn't want to go into university full time, so I took a university degree apprenticeship. So I was learning the manufacturing of the brushes for 3 years, while also doing business management at uni. And then following that, I'm now within a full-time sort of marketing role in the company.
What I want is a very similar scenario to my father. When my father started at Windsor's, you spent time in the factory, you learnt the product, you did it properly. And this is what I want Johnny to do. In the factory, we've started him right from the bottom, learning all the brush making jobs. So he's got a thorough grounding. And I wanted it to be that way because so many times you hear that third generation can go and mess a business up. That ain't going to happen here. Roy's original vision really was to specialise purely in brushes. That's what he wanted to do. He did get sidetracked on a couple of occasions and realised that that was a mistake. As they say, you learn from mistakes, and from that day onwards, we've specialised purely in brushes, and I think that's what gives us our strength.
So I feel like there's definitely been generation shifts as my father and then I came into the business. Obviously, he brought in the sort of manufacturing side of things. And then coming in now, I've had the opportunity to actually bring us up to speed with, social media and the artist connections that he's not necessarily had the time for. So it's been my role more recently to actually work with sort of local artists. So obviously we have the brush know-how and we know if a brush is good, but not necessarily how it's used or why artists use it. So that's another part of my role, is to actually, bring the artists in, the small local artists, and see how they use them and why they use them and get that understanding to aid our product development going forward.
The thinking behind the craftsmanship of a good brush is essentially the brush maker must be adept at handling fibres. There are many different fibres used. The main thing is getting the fill of the brush absolutely right. Too tight and the brush will splay. Too slack and the hair will either fall out, or the glue that we use to cement the bristles into position will simply run through the brush. So that's the first key to manufacturing a good brush. From there, we move on to getting the shaping absolutely right. There is a difference between a good and a poor quality brush. Synthetic hair tends to be pretty consistent, whereas Sable hair, you've got quite a lot of spring towards the tip of the brush. So some brush manufacturers may decide to use a shorter length of hair, but the result may well be that the brush is too soft and floppy. We tend to cut quite a bit of hair to waste at the back and use the tip of the brush, and that makes the brush a little more expensive, but it improves the quality massively. The natural hairs are graded in length, so bristle or sable or squirrel hair, any natural hair, we can purchase that in different lengths, starting from maybe 28 millimetres up to about 55 millimetres. Synthetic hair is a little bit different. We can buy it in individual lengths, but we much prefer to buy the longer lengths because it makes mixing the hair much easier. For some brushes we hand mix. For most brushes we actually use a mixing machine which speeds the process up in a big way. It's more sensible for us to buy much longer lengths of synthetic hair because we can mix it much easier, and then we have a guillotine that we can cut the hair to length when the brush maker is putting individual brush sizes together. Well, the ferrule is vital. The ferrule is essentially the go-between between the handle and the actual brush fibres. We use either an aluminium ferrule to provide longevity, or brass, which is nickel-plated. They're for the higher quality brushes. Both are made of a malleable material, and the reason for that is that once the actual brush head or the fibres are cemented into position, you then have the brush head, which consists of the fibre and the ferrule. So the brush head is then glued onto a wooden handle. Now, because metal and wood aren't necessarily compatible materials, as I say, once they've been glued on, we then put a batch of brushes through a crimping or a clenching machine, and that crimps the actual ferrule onto the handle to give it a more secure finish. It's about proportion. It's about when you develop a brush, it's essentially getting the proportion of the brush right. So it's got the spring, the belly, everything's got to be in the right place. It's got a point. So if a brush is too short, it may not carry the colour. If it's too long, it may be too floppy. It's really a question of making that brush work for each size. A range of brushes may carry 20 different sizes, so they're not all going to be the same length. So you've got to make the brush or proportion it absolutely correctly. The handle design is important. It tends to be more important the larger the brush. When you're manufacturing a small treble zero brush, there's only so much shape you can put in a handle. It's a very thin, spindly handle, and there's no way round that. Having said that, one of our recent ranges adopts a triangular grip handle, which many people like because it lends itself to a better control when you're holding it, and some people like the feel of the tri-grip handle. But generally on the larger brushes, the handles are shaped ergonomically, so it's just got a lovely feel in the hand. Handles come in slightly different lengths. Most high quality brushes, we tend to use a 7-inch handle, but as you go up the size range, so you've got a big size 20 or 24 Proline, they can be used with an 8 or a 9-inch handle, and the reason for that is just to give the whole brush some sort of proportion, but it also gives it a nice balance in the hand, so it gives it a much nicer feel. What we try and do is keep the job as varied as possible. We've got the skilled brush makers who are adept at what they do, but we like to think that everyone is skilled in some way. And what we try and do, even for the brush makers, we try and give them as much variation in their work as possible. And we even bring them onto the finishing department at times. So everybody feels as if they're not just doing the same job sort of day in, day out. And we as I say, we try and make it as varied as we can. We are now based in a Yorkshire mill, which is lovely to have that provenance. Yorkshire mills were built for the woolen industry in Yorkshire, and it was very much a handmade product. And here we are now. We've utilised an old building, It's not without its issues, but it's a good old-fashioned mill, and we're producing a handmade product in Skipton, and it's something that we feel very proud of. So we've got approximately 20 employees. The mill's on 3 levels plus an adjoining warehouse. The main manufacturing workspace is on the top floor because you've got the natural light that comes in through the roof. They call it the Northern Lights, the traditional mill-shaped roof. So that's the natural working area. Because we're on 3 floors, it's not so much of an issue because it's light manufacturing is artist brushes. So we've got a lift shaft that runs through the building so we can move goods quite easily across the floors. Yeah, we try and create a team environment for our employees that we want them to feel very much part of the business. And many of them have been with us a long, long time. One lady who's just retired, she's been with us for 36 years. And I've got other long-term employees who have been with us for over 20 years now. What part of our philosophy is that we like to promote from within. So if people are good at their jobs, we can move them through the factory, through different roles, so they feel that they've got a lot of self-worth. We try and be as environmentally friendly as we can. We follow whatever guidelines are laid down. We recycle what we can, and we're also currently looking at alternatives to packaging. In terms of the product itself, particularly the brush handles, they're manufactured from wood again, rather than using plastics. We get those from a company in Germany who are very ethically strong on environmental policies, and they're all FSA registered. That means they come from environmentally friendly forests. And the lacquer used for the handles is water-based rather than oil-based. Well, I suppose animal welfare is always a contentious issue because people don't like the idea of animals being killed for brush-making materials. Bristle is sourced from a pig, goat hair, you've got pony hair, ox hair, all sorts of hair used in the brush-making industry. And they're essentially making use of a product from the food industry because it's an animal byproduct. So if animals are going to be killed in the food industry, then it is a use of the materials, so the whole of the animal is being used. Squirrel and the sable is a little bit more of a contentious issue because people perceive that it's part of the fashion industry. Now, the tail of the animal from a sable and a squirrel hair is used for brush making, and it was classed as furry as waste, and it was never used in the garment industry apart from the odd embellishment. So it was a byproduct that was thrown away, and brush makers came upon it and decided that they could use the tail of the animal because they possessed the longer lengths of fibre used for brush making. These animals do live a natural life, though we do understand that there are concerns for certain people. Therefore, we've developed lots of alternatives, and the big development was synthetic hair. Well, every artist has their preference. Sable hair is a real go-to, and it always was. It was always seen as the sort of holy grail of a watercolour brush. So people have always tried to emulate that, whether it's by producing another sable or synthetic range. But the Renaissance sable came about because there was a movement towards synthetics, a big movement. And as a result, I suppose many people stopped using sable and squirrel hair. And then there became a glut in the market. There was a lot more sable available, so the prices came down. So we sort of just simply seized on the opportunity and we stockpiled quite some decent stocks of sable hair, and it led to the exact word, the renaissance of sable again. People had moved towards synthetics, and it gave us the opportunity to sort of reinvent a good quality sable at a very affordable price for people that really did enjoy using sable brushes. Unfortunately, the cost of sable and squirrel hair has skyrocketed quite recently, and it's again caused some big hikes in some of the sable brush prices. So once again, it's made us look at alternatives and new alternatives which we've created. following the development of the Proline range, we decided to look at a mixture between Sable and synthetic to try and create the best of both worlds. And we successfully did that with our connoisseur range. You can afford to put a little bit less Sable into the larger sizes, which helps keeps the price down and much less expensive than buying a pure Sable. So that was one of the early breakthroughs. One of the more recent breakthroughs has been our Sable-esque range. We wanted to sort of kill two birds with one stone and provide squirrel users in the form of the Renaissance squirrel mop brush with a direct alternative, and also an alternative for sable lovers who like to use big sables. The problem with a big sable is it's very expensive. So we came up with the same idea that we came up with the connoisseur range, and we decided to mix synthetic hair with goat hair in order to provide a good spring but great colour holding opportunities. Made in the traditional style, it works beautifully. The misuse of a brush can be a bit of an issue for us, because some people may come to us and say, well, why is my brush worn out, before they think it's due to be worn out. But people use brushes in many different ways. Some people might adopt a stippling technique, or some people might adopt a dry brush or a scrubbing technique. And certain techniques will cause the wear and tear of a brush to happen much faster. One little trick is, if a brush gets damaged, we often find in an art shop where people put a brush cap on a fibre and it bends the fibres back, and you have this splayed brush and it looks an absolute mess. Sometimes people leave a brush in a pot of water where the tip can be damaged, and when they take it out, then there's a bend at the tip. Now, under normal circumstances, you'd think, well, that's the end of that brush. We can't really use it anymore. But you can bring it back to life, and a simple fix is to boil a kettle and drop the brush in just a drop of very hot water, and that straightens the fibre up again, and it will make a brush that you may think is damaged reworkable. So the main thing when you're using a brush is, particularly acrylic paint, is to keep it wet and just keep dipping it in the water. The main thing when you're cleaning a brush out after use is you can get pigment build-up. The heavier pigments will build up at the base of the ferrule, but that can still happen with watercolour paints as well. So my advice is to take hold of the fibre and actually knead the hair in the ferrule. So you're holding the handle, holding the fibre, and then kneading it from side to side or in a circular motion, and that will help dislodge any pigment that can build up in the base of the ferrule. And shaping a brush up after use, particularly a sable brush, you want it to maintain a point. So like any natural hair, if it's pointed up after use, when it dries, it should maintain a sharp point so you can use it next time. We've always collaborated with some high-profile artists. Ron Ranson was one of them. We developed a hake brush with him. And the nice thing with doing the collaboration, we improved the hake. We gave it more of a traditional look. And we developed it with Ron because he said the original hake was too soft and floppy and it wouldn't do what he wanted it to do. As a result of that, we ended up branding the brush or co-branding it. So it was called the Pro Arte Ron Ranson Hake. And that was one of the best moves we ever made, because Ron, he was a practicing painter, he was an author, and everybody loved the Ron Ranson style. He had this technique that was known as the fast and loose technique. You could create a fairly straightforward painting in about half an hour flat, and he made it accessible to the audience. So people loved his style of painting. So it's been a very successful collaboration. Terry Harrison was another one where Terry has quite a range of purpose-made brushes that perform specific tasks. So it's something we've always been involved with to a certain degree, but John is the one really to discuss this with, because he's the one that's actually collaborating with some new, more contemporary artists.
So we work with local art houses, recently one in Wakefield and one in Leeds. So we work with those. We have, quite an open relationship, and they'll test a lot of our products, or, we'll use them for some of our shoots and things, and quite openly talk about the product itself and how it could be better, or, their thoughts and feelings on it, why they use it, the ways that they use it. And again, that just gives us a bit of a deeper understanding on how the end user uses our products. So our quality control, I guess, then is on sort of two levels. So obviously, as manufacturers, we always check our products before going out. But actually, the quality control within development comes from using local artists and how they use the brushes. Obviously, like we know if a brush is okay, but actually if they use it in a different way, and or ways we wouldn't have thought of, or it could be improved in this way. So I guess that's another sort of way of quality control.
Yeah, usually we develop something if the market changes or there's a requirement for something. One of the most recent developments that we're putting together is an alternative to Sable. We've just been shown a natural hair product known as Black Sable, and that's something we're currently developing. More often than not, you develop a product because there's a need in the marketplace. But every now and again, you may be shown a lovely handle or a certain type of fibre, and you think, well, that's so good, we've got to use it. And bristling was one such example. It resembles bristle so beautifully that we've just felt we had to develop something on that line. And as a result of the development, we decided to call it bristling, because the word itself is synonymous with a bristle, but with the lean, it's synonymous with proline, sableine. So the natural progression was to use the word bristling.
No, I'm definitely excited for what the future holds. Not just in product development, but actually how we can connect to the artists and use Pro Arte more as a tool rather than brush to express that creativity. Massive part of my role that I sort of take pride in is actually, we don't just make brushes. It's the people who make the brushes and the people who use the brushes. It's not just a product. We've had staff with us for over 30 years that have so much experience, and they're the ones who can actually, have the skill to make the brush. Where it's made, we're really proud of the fact that we're Yorkshire handmade. And actually going on to how they're used, it's not like this is a brush, this is a painting. It's right, this is how I express my creativity, and I can use this as a tool to then sort of lay down my ideas.
The future, again, for Pro Arte is the fact that we're always looking at, because we're manufacturers, we're always looking at product development and moving things forward. But we manufacture, but we sell to shops. So we look at what retailers do, and we've got to be part of that, because if we want products to sell, then that's displaying products, as my father first identified when he worked for Windsor's, is of paramount importance. So we've just developed a merchandising unit to carry the brush sets, and that's currently sold in a number of shops, and that's being very, very successful. So we're continuing development on all sorts of levels, not just the products. It's everything.